And we are now live. Welcome, everyone. This is the weekly crypto recap. I am absolutely delighted to have you all here as we go over all of the topics from the week and discuss the latest news in crypto. And really, really delighted to have these three wonderful people on the show with me today. You would have a new person here that you have not met before on this show. I will introduce him last, but please welcome back to the show. We have Sasha Hodder, who's a crypto lawyer. You would have seen interviews with her. She's amazing. Hi, Sasha. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
No worries. We have Chris Coney, who is a very popular YouTuber. If you haven't checked out his channel, make sure you do. I'll put all the details in the text below. Welcome, Chris, back to the show.
Back with Naomi.
Back with the show. And then we have Ashe Oro, who is International Man of Mystery, also joining us, Crypto OG. Wonderful to have you on the show for the first time, Ashe.
Hey, thank you so much to be here.
Now, the last time I saw you, Ashe, it was under less happy circumstances because we were having a dance off.
Ooh.
And you cut your foot open and literally covered the entire floor with blood and got carted out in a wheelchair. This is a true story, everyone. So how's that foot going?
Well, we're all healed up now, but I've got my legs my tail between my legs, and I will not be challenging you to a dance off ever again.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you've learned your lesson. No, that's not how it went down, actually. I was singing very bad karaoke at the time. It was Whitney Houston. My voice had been gone because this was at the end of the night.
And I went into a seizure. And I was
actually, honestly, no, well, you were a great distraction. I was thinking, God, this could not get any worse for everyone who have to listen to me not be able to get these notes because I've just been screaming. And then it did get worse. They got covered in blood because your foot exploded. So that's how that went down. Anyway, that was a wonderful night at the Satoshi Roundtable. So I'm glad that your foot is on the mend and delighted to have you here on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's start off. We've got a lot to cover here. I do want to start off. Last week, Chris, you would know, we chatted a lot about Wyoming, what's going on there. We went through some of the bills that were just passed, and Caitlin had just done a tweet storm announcing some really exciting new things that were going on. And so the next day, I actually did a live stream with Caitlin where she walked through in detail a lot of these things. And she gave me a couple of takeaways from this that I just wanted to share with everyone as a recap, because what's going on in Wyoming, I think, is just so tremendously important. And Sasha, I know that you probably want to weigh in on this from the legal standpoint, but basically, so Nevada just became the third state to introduce what is called the URVCBA plus Supplemental Act, which basically recognizes only indirect ownership of Bitcoin and other virtual currencies. That is an absolute disaster. It's basically regulatory capture, institutions who are inserting themselves as middlemen saying, you must use us in order for ownership to be recognized. And this is a bill that she has been fighting across a lot of states and in Wyoming in particular. And so she said, if there's anything that people can do right now, because she's doing tremendous work, I wanted people to donate to her cause. She's just a volunteer. She said, no, if there's anything people can do is to reach out to their representative, to the state officials, and ask for these two following bills to be enacted. So the first one of those, and I put all of these details in the description as well, is called the HB 0070 bill. It's the Open Blockchain Tokens Exemptions Bill. And the second one is the SF 0125, which is a Digital Assets Existing Law bill. So the first one basically says that digital utility tokens aren't securities. And the second one is about direct property rights. So deliberately going against what Nevada has just done, saying that we recognize direct property rights. We don't need middlemen to come in and handle these assets. So have you guys been looking into what's going on here? Does anyone have anything to add? I just wanted to mention it briefly as like a call to action before we really get going, because I know we covered this a lot in the last show. But Sasha in particular, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I mean, I listened to your podcast with Caitlin, I think it was yesterday, and it was great information. It was really interesting about the rehypothecation stuff, and yeah, I think, she's doing great work. It's unfortunate that other states are putting this the ownership stuff in place where you can't own it directly. I think it seems like it just doesn't make any sense for what digital assets are.
Absolutely. And that's what all the lawmakers said. So when she was reaching out to people, especially in Wyoming, about this and explaining to them what this bill was that traditional finance really wanted introduced, and she explained it to them and said, listen, this is saying that you can't have direct ownership of this, the same way that securities operate, where you need brokers to come in, and it becomes this very obfuscated, complex process. She said, like, that's what they're trying to make happen in the crypto world, and it doesn't need to. It's very easy to own these assets yourself. You don't need these middlemen. And so I think it's just so wonderful, like the work she's doing to educate people about this. So I hope that everyone in their states reaches out so what just happened in Nevada doesn't happen.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This just confuses me. So in the US, right, the jurisdiction depends on where you reside. So like if you live in Wyoming, this applies to you. And then if you live in Nevada, the other law applies of indirect ownership. So it's very much based by where you live, because
it is, but there are different reciprocal relationships that different states have as well. So it's not as simple as it only applies to people who live there. There's like this very complex thing going on.
Right.
But Sasha, you'd be able to probably explain that a little better.
Yeah, so it also depends where you register your company. A lot of LLCs will register in Delaware, or like a Florida individual can register an LLC in Wyoming to take advantage of those Wyoming regulations. So they don't have to physically be there. And even when you write contracts, you can put a choice of law provision, and you can say, we choose Wyoming's law to govern this.
Okay. Contract. Interesting.
Yeah, and there's also, I mean, Wyoming invented the LLC as well. And there are some really interesting rules with LLCs that people don't realize. Like if individuals, and I'm not giving advice to anyone, but if individuals to register themselves as like sole proprietor of an LLC in Wyoming, they don't actually have to be living there to be operating within those laws. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So
it doesn't take you out of the federal laws, because the federal laws apply as soon as you use the international wires, or like, so basically anytime you do anything on the internet or drive on a road that goes outside of the state, you're now using interstate commerce, which then brings the federal law into place.
Right.
Right.
We found the real purpose of the roads now, is to keep the federal government over us.
That's it. That's it.
If that's true, though, Sasha, what's the point in all of these Wyoming and state level laws if everything on the internet is federal?
It's well, I think it gives some kind of thing that you can say to the SEC or the federal laws, like, look how these states have handled it, and then maybe they can, it'll filter
create a
out
consensus, or okay.
Yeah,
okay, sure.
That's a really great topic. Maybe we should cover that in another video. The world of the internet and how do physical laws apply, how do physical jurisdictions apply when most of what we do, most of our business happens in the ether.
It very much reminded me of like the states in Europe. Is it European law? Is it British law? It's very confusing.
Everything is confusing because government. Am I right?
Because
amen.
Because government. So let's move on. I did just want to bring those up at the start because I think it's so important just to keep track of what's going on in terms of the regulatory environment around America in particular. So moving on, I wanted to talk about this mysterious Ether mining payout. So apparently $2,100 was a mining reward, and Sparkpool has actually frozen this because they thought it might have been a mistake or something. Have you guys been keeping up with this?
Yeah, 2,100 Ethereum. So I think it's worth about $300,000 as a mining.
$300,000.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I want to think this is some conspiracy and whitewashing money and stuff like this from illicit gains, because that's much more dramatic, it could literally be as easy as they meant to send 2,000 Ethereum, the $300,000 as a transaction and the $15 as the mining fee. So unfortunately, it could be as boring as somebody just put them in the wrong location.
Right. What's confusing about the way it's being reported, though, is that the headlines are saying block reward when it's a transaction fee that someone accidentally, because it's not like Ethereum's broken and it's accidentally issuing too many Ether. It's that someone probably typed in the wrong box and put $300,000 transaction fee instead of $300,000 of Ether, and then oopsie, it was actually $14 they ended up sending. as
Right.
the transactional value with
Oh
a
my
$300,000 fee.
Which sounds like a bit like a good transaction fee to try to get your transaction.
You get it
actually
in the next block,
processed.
I think.
Yeah, you get a next block. Well, so it's this is an unfortunate aspect of being forced to use gas in general. It's unfriendly at the user experience.
I was pushing off on EOS for a second there.
I haven't even said the
Sorry,
word yet.
that
I
was
haven't
me.
even
That was
said
me.
the word.
That was me. Because I was on the cusp of my tongue. I was like, couldn't happen on EOS.
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
But no, I'm glad to see that the miner is freezing it and giving it an opportunity, not just taking it as revenue, trying to give the sender, the user, an opportunity. Hopefully they reach out and it gets situated. But otherwise, happy payday to the miner.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, that's happened before. That's something that does happen more frequently than gets reported. And I remember in early days, wasn't it like Fried Cat or someone? There's like this famous transaction where again they put in the transaction fee instead of the amount, switched them over, but then that money actually got returned. And so there's been a lot of good deeds like that in the crypto community, which makes me love the space so much. When we just want to see it work, we don't want to see people screwed out of money so that they leave the space and never come back. Like, we want people in this ecosystem. So although there are a lot of bad players here as well, I think that there are also a lot of good players. So it's just nice to have an occasional story of people putting the brakes on and saying, let's check this out before we run away with that money. Speaking of running away with money, anyone keeping up with what's happening with Quadriga? We reported on that last week. It's not in our list of topics to cover, so I don't want to look at it too much, but it is interesting just covering that. I know there was a tweet storm, and we'll get to that in a second, but there was a big discussion between Brian Armstrong had his theories about what happened. In fact, let's go into that now. I'm gonna pull that up. So do you want to start us up on that, Sasha? Because I know you were interested in that.
Yeah, sure. Nova Scotia is my hometown. That's where I grew up. And, a lot of Canadians, there's been a lot of positive Bitcoin momentum in Canada, but in that area, it's a small area. A lot of them, my mom gets questions all the time. What's Sasha doing with Bitcoin? Why is she involved in that? Like, they just see it as a, kind of, I guess, nefarious use cases or whatever. And then for this to happen right in that small community is kind of a shock. But yeah, I thought it was good. Brian Armstrong went into it.
Let's give people an overview before we get into that. So Quadriga, basically what happened was there's this exchange, and they had some issues, and there've been some withdrawing issues and all kinds of things. And then the CEO dies, and apparently he held the only copy of the private key. Apparently all these funds that are in cold storage are no longer accessible. Apparently then they accidentally send $500,000 more to this cold storage where no one has access to, like, all of these weird things going on. And then Brian Armstrong did this tweet storm, which basically gave a summary of what he thinks. Did you want to start with that, and then we can?
Yeah, and I guess for context, it's in the Supreme Court it's in the Bankruptcy Court of Nova Scotia, Canada, which is why it's I've been following. It's interesting just in general, but it even is, closer to home because it's in, my friend's dad is the judge on it too, or he's very close to it. I don't think he's the residing judge, but anyway, so what Brian Armstrong tweeted out was that they did their own internal research on it, and they used their blockchain analytics tools, which I don't know if we had that written down, but they've just recently acquired some very high profile or, strong analytics as well. But anyways, I don't know if they used that their new technology, but they looked into it, and he did disclaim that this is purely speculation, but he said it looked like their cold storage was actually being controlled by a human, like that it was manual transfers that were happening, beginning in early 2008, and that there was some kind of bug. Yeah, they were moving to this cold storage wallet. Even in 2017, they said it looked like they either got hacked, or he didn't say this, but, funds started moving. Something nefarious might have started happening at that time. And that's kind of what forced them to, not force them, but what led them down the path to create a Ponzi scheme, and then with the bull market, they were able to kind of, a rising high tide lifts all boats. Like they were able to keep it all going. And then when the bear market caught up, basically it became evident that they had no liquidity. People were having trouble getting money out. They were using mismanagement. They were mismanaging it in an attempt to cover everything up. And then there was this guy, Michael Patron, who is thought to possibly be Omar Dahani, who spent several years, I believe, in prison in America and then moved to Canada. So it's kind of the opposite of what happened with that CG blockchain Boaz Manor story. But there's something weird going on there. And then, David Silver and some others have said they don't believe that that Mr. Gerald Cotton is actually dead, because the Omar Dahani guy, he actually was in prison for some kind of like passport, fake death certificates, fake passports are very rampant in the area that he was dealing in, and also in the town where he is said to have died. And so his death certificate, there's questions around whether that's a real death certificate or not. And then a lot of money was moved into his wife, who actually has 3 different names on all these property deeds in Nova Scotia. She now has between May 16th and October 2018, she bought 16 properties. So they're all worth, around $7.5 million. And they were heavily mortgaged and moved into trusts, which in David Silver's tweet storm, he pointed out that's, a pretty common thing when people are doing frauds, is to protect the assets with these mortgages and trusts. It means when the bankruptcy court goes to attach a lien to them, it's going to be very difficult if they're inside a trust.
So there's just layers upon layers upon layers of intrigue. I mean, this would make, if there wasn't already a podcast detailing this, there may not be one. Maybe I'm going to start one, because I'm just going to tell it like this amazing story that it is. Like this guy, I mean, it's just, there's so much here. Like if you go to Brian Armstrong's tweet storm that he had about his idea is basically that, because everything was going underwater, because this was some bug that happened with their cold storage, as Sasha mentioned, that everything started to go downhill. And then when the bear market kicked in, that kind of exacerbated everything. They couldn't keep this Ponzi scheme afloat anymore. But then with the death of the CEO, maybe management took that as an opportunity to say, let's just cut out losses and say we lost access with that. That seems pretty plausible. CEO dies, that's a great out. They can say, okay, we're giving up now. Let's just end the whole shindig. But then you have David Silver, who pushes back and says, no, we think that the death is actually a fake in itself. We think this because of his partner who was in prison, as you said. Like there's all these mitigating factors. There's assets going into trusts being protected, being heavily mortgaged. So it's just layer upon layer of intrigue. And I'm not sure that we know, we haven't had any clarity. We haven't really had management speaking out and providing any clarity on this. So we're going to have to keep watching what's going on here.
There's a Telegram channel called, it's a guy named Crypto Medication. Or on Twitter, he's called Proof of Research, and he's really been digging into it. There's some good information coming out. A lot of it's conspiracies. There's not.
I was going to say, when can we crowdsource the movie?
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, I want to watch it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's do it. That would actually be really cool. If someone wants to write me a script and send that to me, I would totally make it like a super shoestring budget of that. That'd be fun. That'd be really fun.
Just to round that off, did you see Caitlin Long put her comment on this? She actually responded to the tweet storm from Brian Armstrong. She said, wow,
really?
If true, it shows again that insolvent financial institutions can stay in business a long time until they become illiquid. This is why proof of keys was very important, and why crypto in Wyoming law about rehypothecation being a felony is ensuring solvent institutions.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I'm sure we're all a big fan of of proof of keys, or at least the ethos that it stands for, the idea that you want to know what's going on in the financial institutions where you're holding your money. You want clarity there. You know, if institutions are going to do this stuff, maybe they'll offer you better rates or whatever, great. But you need to actually be let in on what the details of that arrangement are. You know, it needs to be very clear what you're getting involved with. If they're rehypothecating your assets, if they're just lending all of that out and you're being told that it's all just sitting there, that's not okay. That's actually fraudulent. So, yeah,
we need proof of reserve somehow.
Absolutely. And so with crypto, I mean, that becomes more and more viable, right? So it's we're definitely headed down the right path here. I do want to move on because we have a lot of stuff to cover. So let's, Sasha, this is another thing that I want you to kind of take the reins on. So we've got some, let me just pull it up here. We've got the CFTC, like how about you just start from the top and walk us through what's going on there? But we've got a lot of comments, including a Craig Wright comment, which we can all read and have a little bit of a giggle about. But yeah, you take the reins on this one.
Sure. So this is why I didn't get a chance to read some of the other news stories you shared, because it sucked up a lot of my time today reading these comments that everyone put. But
it gets addictive. I started reading through all of them, and it's just like I agree with. I mean, what we were saying before about the amount of regulatory capture that people are trying to do right now, where they're writing, you know, basically CFTC is asking for guidance with respect to digital assets, and you have some people writing to them say, digital assets, leave it alone. Other people writing to them say, digital assets, they should be heavily regulated. Also, we have this great financial tool. We should be in charge of managing it all. And it's just like such blatant regulatory capture where people want to, you know, put rules on everyone, but be the ones controlling the reins. So walk us through some of these comments and what's actually going on, Sasha.
Sure. So back in, I believe it was on December 11th, the CFTC put out a request for information about Ethereum specifically. And you know, last summer, we had the comments from SEC Director Hinman stating that he did not think Ethereum was a security and that it was sufficiently decentralized, that even though they did an ICO, the Howey test no longer applies because it's a decentralized network. So I think that, you know, started this motion of the CFTC has claimed jurisdiction over Bitcoin as Bitcoin being a commodity. So now it's trying to assess whether that's the right move for Ethereum. So it's looking at the, you know, similarities and differences to Bitcoin. And if it does go through that Ethereum becomes a commodity, it would be available in any of the futures contracts that the CME offers. It would be available for people starting crypto hedge funds or already having crypto hedge funds without worrying that it's a security or any, you know, that they're violating securities laws by trading it. So it would open up a lot of, I guess, you know, anything that's available for Bitcoin on institutional side would also be available for Ethereum. So there's a big vested interest in a lot of, you know, there's going to be a lot of money to be had if this decision would go through for places that can, you know, it doubles their offering capability. So looking through what people said, you know, and then so the Craig Wright one, you know, he took this as an opportunity to put on the record that he is Satoshi, and he.
Well, I like that he's just writing. He's writing to CFTC. It's just like this such a pompous act, just to say like, here. Well, when I invented Bitcoin, which started out as a project with the Australian government in 1997, like it's just, oh God, he's entertaining, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like, let's all give a round of applause to Craig for being
There's
so
nothing like a little drama.
Quadriga wasn't enough. We got Craig on the other side. Maybe he was feeling a bit left out. Maybe he wasn't getting as much attention as he wanted. And so he just felt like, oh, how do I get back in the spotlight? I know. I'll write to the CFTC and tell them I'm Satoshi Nakamoto. I won't prove it by signing anything with the private key that, you know, I should have access to, but I'll just tell them in a statement.
Yeah. But he had some really negative things to say about Ethereum. He took the opportunity to really go hard at it, like saying, you know, there's less than 20 nodes. It's a flawed concept. It's reached its computational limits. He said the Plasma network, along with the Bitcoin Lightning network, was built solely for the purpose of taking records off chain to increase the ability to use Bitcoin and Ethereum to buy drugs on dark webs, on the dark web.
That's low.
Yeah.
And porn. Let's not forget about that. Come on.
Yeah.
Porn deserves this thing.
Isn't BSV like porn chain though? Hasn't he taken the mantle for that?
All
of the
It is porn chain.
Yeah, have
for
been
sure.
following that all the child porn that they immediately put in there after they increased. Anyway, a bit of a digression, but let's read out this response because I really enjoyed his wording in this. So from Craig S. Wright, Organization End Chain Limited, comment text. This is a response format. I don't know why I'm speaking with a British accent. To the Commodity Futures Trading Commission request for input on crypto asset mechanics and markets. My name is Dr. Craig Wright, and under the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto, I completed a project I started in 1997 that was filed with the Australian government in part under an Oz industry project registered with the Department of Innovation as Blacknet. So there you go. If you were wondering about the beginnings of Bitcoin, that's how it started.
That was a good rebrand. Blacknet to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Well, I got to give him that.
Blacknet to GovCoin, I think you.
Yes.
So Craig wrote that, but then you've also got this bit of a debate between Jesse Powell of Kraken and Bruce Tupper of CoinRegTech. So Sasha, walk us through that bit of a skirmish.
Yeah, well, it was just Jesse put out on Twitter that basically it was a blatant attempt for regulatory capture, and I think he might be right with that. And it was interesting reading through a lot of them, just the difference of opinion or the difference of information that was coming. Some people think Ethereum is, like Consensus went through and gave a lot of definitions of, basically saying it is decentralized, and they gave it's decentralized from a political aspect or a logistics aspect. Like they went through and defined it all, and went through a lot of the technical side of stuff. And then you have someone named Spike Spiegel, which when I looked that up, it's like some Japanese cartoon character, but the complete opposite. So I think as the SEC, luckily they've been following this space, or as the CFTC, they've been following this for a number of years now. So I think they probably, this won't be the sole basis of their decision, but it would probably be interesting for them seeing what divergent answers they got.
I bet. And just to read out Bruce Tupper, so the one that Jesse Powell called out as being a rent seeker, reading out what he actually wrote there. So he says regulations and oversight of the token markets should be imposed by the CFTC and the SEC. CoinRegTech is developing a digital asset trade repository that will record transactions and confirm ownership of tokens. It's very convenient that they think all this regulation and oversight should happen, but they happen to have this repository that would, feed directly into them being able to do that. So yeah, there is a lot of what Sasha was saying. There's a lot of this stuff going on, and let's just hope that good decisions come of this, rather than things like in Nevada, things like let's move in the direction of Wyoming, please.
Yeah. Coinbase was surprisingly neutral. They went into the risks of a 51% attack and other things, and they put the pros and cons. I thought they would be very heavy on the side of Ethereum is definitely should be something the CFTC would regulate, because if not, Coinbase must have got that. You know what probably happened? I just thought of this now. Coinbase, after they listed all those alternative coins recently, they must have their ATS or some kind of ability to sell securities now. So if Ethereum was not considered a commodity, they're okay. Because otherwise, and we saw last year in Congress, when they were talking, they were very heavy saying Ethereum is certainly a commodity and should be under the CFT's jurisdiction. And now that it's, in their interest actually for it not to
exactly.
That's
they would have a better hold on the marketplace if it was deemed a security at this point.
It was when Amazon, when you had the internet sales tax being thrown around in, what was it, 2014, I think, was when I was getting lots of hype, and Amazon was coming around saying yes, we're in support of this, knowing full well that they're large enough to be able to handle this, that this would most certainly kill off a lot of internet competition, that they also have physical locations now, so they wouldn't be affected. So yeah, a lot of that sort of stuff happening there. Anything else that we wanted to say about this before we moved on?
I think, not much to say. It'll be interesting to see the results. I kind of am leaning towards like my personal thought is that they will consider it a commodity is probably the direction they'll go.
Yeah, and I read the consensus's response as well. That was really interesting.
Yeah, these native platform level tokens, I think they're going to have a lot of difficulty claiming these as securities, especially if they're needed to use the network. So I don't think that they're going to go after Ethereum specifically. Now, DApp level stuff, then obviously a lot of those are going to be deemed securities, but Ethereum most likely is going to be safe. I have no law background whatsoever.
So let's move on. Let's talk about Gladius. So this is a company that ran an ICO, raised a bunch of money. There's always a lot of back and forth with the SEC as they're trying to figure out what's in our jurisdiction, what is not. If you talk to the SEC, you talk to Jay Clayton, he literally told me, presume everything is a security. And you got to kind of like shake your head at that. Like, you can't just presume that everything you're doing is illegal, and so like we need clarity. We need them to make a decision, and they just have not been coming through with any sort of clarity. But what they are doing is piecemeal, picking and choosing certain companies and providing these test cases, and they're providing very minimal penalties. And Gladius is one of these companies. Basically, what they're doing with a lot of these companies is they're saying, oh, you violated our rules, but it's early days. We'll give you a slap on the wrist, pay this token amount of a fine, and pay back all your money. And meanwhile, these companies are like, okay, I'm just going to take it. It's not worth the hassle of fighting this or the court fees or anything. And what they're doing is building up this reservoir of precedent cases that basically when they want to go after a bigger fish, they'll be able to refer to and say, listen, we set the precedent with all of these cases that agreed with us. Right. So Gladius, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Naomi, go ahead.
I'm just going to say Gladius has just been added to that reservoir. They have just settled charges with the SEC of running an unregistered securities offering, and they are being forced to pay back a bunch of money. So let's talk a little bit about this and what, because there are other cases that this sort of ties directly into. So let's talk about the repercussions of this.
Yeah, so I just want to start out by saying, like, this is filthy and dirty way to do this, because some of these companies, these ICOs, these teams, they don't want to drag out a year or 2 years, and it's the risk reward of them to just pay off the mob. I mean, the government is much easier for them than to actually go and try to fight this stuff. So it's easier on them in the short term, and it's better long term for the government, because they build up this precedent of like, hey, look at all these people that agreed to us to buy us off, basically, and they're going to use that to establish case law eventually, and then regular law, and it's just really dirty. Just no respect there.
Absolutely.
It's influenced by intimidation.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the root of all of it, right?
Yeah, for sure. And let's go through some of these past cases. So Airfox, Paragon coin. Sasha, I know that you've been following this really closely. This has kind of started off with your sort of era, the legal and SEC jurisdiction. So walk us through what happened with those cases and why this is important.
Sure. So those two cases were the SEC came out on November 16th with kind of a path for companies to follow if they did an unregistered security sale, that they could register as a security and give everyone an opportunity to get a refund of their security that they purchased. So there's very specific steps that they have to take. And Gladius came out, I guess they went and self-reported to the SEC in the summer of 2018. They said, we don't want any trouble. Here's what we did. And they raised, after the Dow report came out that said, some of these are securities, they raised 12.7 million worth of Ethereum from, I forget how many investors, but there were quite a few. And they did make statements on their website, like the more people that use our service, the higher the price of the token is going to be. And none of their statements were particularly like scammy or clickbaity or anything. I think what they were even saying is probably true. Like, the more people that would use this thing, the more the token would go up. Because
that applies to everything, right? The network effect is going to increase the value of these things, but you're not allowed to mention that, because then
it might be more like the pre-sale thing where you get pre-sale 40% discount and then they do it in batches, which is kind of like, it's gray, because it's like you're almost saying the token's going to go up in value, but not. It's not going to go up in value. The price is going to rise. That's different.
Yeah.
Oh,
It didn't say whether they did a pre-sale or not on this one, but I think everyone was doing the pre-sales at that time, so it wouldn't surprise me if they did. But the SEC really liked the fact that they self-reported on it. They went hand in hat or whatever, tail between their legs, saying, SEC, we submit to you. And so the FCC is not laying any charges on the people that started it, but they do have to file. They have 90 days from today to file, or from when this was announced, I think a couple days ago, to file this Form 10 and register with the SEC, which that is going to require an expensive, legal undertaking to get that form filed. And then they have to distribute a notice to all their potential claimants, letting everyone know that they have a right to recover any money that, they invested, which, when people were doing the ICOs at that time, most people were not KYCing. So I wonder how many people will actually come forward and claim that investment, because it requires them to admit, that they have those assets, and it'll show their wallet, and it's a big hassle for the individual. So
that might turn into the margin that the other people who are willing to do that get paid in full.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, they just have to do that on their website, and then they have to give the SEC a report every month saying how many people they've refunded, and keep them up to date. And they have to keep themselves registered as a security for at least 13 months. So they're going to have to file 4 quarterly reports. So it's a lot of paperwork that they're going to have to do to comply with this. But it is what it is.
I think that we're going to see. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
It's just my favorite bit is the quote from the SEC here, where it says, quote, "Today's case shows the benefit of self-reporting and taking proactive steps to remediate unregistered offerings."
It feels like something out of
let that
Hunger
be a
Games,
lesson to you.
right?
Right?
I just want to throw up.
I know, where it's like, citizens, this is good behavior, we shall reward.
Exactly.
If
This
not,
comes into your telescreen.
exactly.
You're like, oh, this is good behavior.
And honestly, I think that what we're going to see here is I think that the SEC is basically going to rule that there were a whole bunch of illegal things happening with the ICO market, and it was all under their jurisdiction. And what's going to evolve is this world where it's split in two. You're going to have one side where the cost of compliance is extraordinary, the barriers to entry is extraordinary through, the legal hoops that you have to jump through, the fees that you have to pay. So you're going to have a certain subset of groups that are probably rooted in traditional finance that are going to be entering this market, just like the last one.
Sure, that's what they're trying to build. They're even saying that we can't own our own property; it has to go through some secondary. So this is the purpose of all of their jobs. If they didn't try to make our lives miserable, then they would be out of a job.
Exactly. But then the other side of the thing, I think we're going to see more and more decentralized exchanges. We're going to see more and more untraceable coins coming into the market. People doing ICOs with vehicles where nothing is reported. There's no KYC. I mean, that's going to be more dangerous for the consumer because it's just getting back into like prohibition era drug markets. It's much better when you have things out in the open on the internet, and you have accountability, you have reputation systems. You can buy and give a review to whoever you're purchasing things from. As soon as you're back in the back alley and everything's underground, and the only enforcement is by the the local mob or whoever the gangster is running things, I mean, that's when you get into dangerous territory. And that's basically what they're forcing onto us. You either have to be in traditional finance, have a lot of money, have a lot of connections, or you have to go
or a criminal. Or you have to be a criminal. Either you use our buddies or you're going to be a criminal. And
you have to be an accredited investor in that other world.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, more and more places like Wyoming, it seems like they are going to be helping us out by basically allowing a lot more freedom in this, allowing safe harbors for people to be exploring and building out tech in the industry without having to worry about a lot of these things. So I'm very excited to see more and more states.
And just gives you a lot more appreciation for Caitlin and what she's doing up in Wyoming.
I know, absolutely. A lot of love for Caitlin. So is there anything more on this that we want to mention before moving on?
It's a good segue into DEXs, I believe.
Absolutely. Well, you want to start us off there, Ash?
Yeah, Binance has come out recently saying that their DEX is it might be operational at this point. I'm not sure. Bitfinex is coming out with DEXs as well. They've had the ETH Finex for a while, and EOS Finex is coming out in just a few short weeks. I'm from the old BitShares world, so we've had the BitShares DEX running strong for over 4 years now, and it's really exciting as someone who it's just a different user experience altogether when you log in with a MetaMask, or you log in with Scatter, or log in with a Lynx wallet, and your coins, unless you're creating a limit order, your coins never have to leave your wallet. You don't have to send to this exchange, and it's just so much safer. I'm not sure if how many people, what percentage of crypto users have actually ever used a DEX in general, but will say that the speed and free transactions and just the user experience is really starting to become something that I think is going to make a difference.
Sure, totally agree.
And let's also talk about the difference between decentralized exchanges and hybrids, because I think that is an important distinction, especially in the eyes of the SEC. I know in the past they've come down on companies that have called themselves decentralized exchanges, and they've ruled, no, you're not decentralized because you have this central focal point. You have this front end that actually is is one company, that if that was shut down, you wouldn't be able to use this decentralized exchange, et cetera, et cetera. So even these models that essentially the underpinnings are peer-to-peer are often hybrid models that the government is considering decentralized. And more as well, they're looking at actual decentralized things and still not quite considering them centralized. And I don't know whether this is just, they're putting their blinders on deliberately because they don't want to see anything as being out of their jurisdiction. I actually asked Jay Clayton this as well in an interview. I interviewed him at Consensus last year and said, are you worried about this new evolution of decentralized exchanges? And are you worried that you're going to lose control? Or are you worried about this area that, may not be able to be controlled by government?
Right.
And his only response was, no. Like, he had nothing to say about that.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether that... Sorry, go ahead, Ash.
Yeah. I mean, we as consumers, we want to have, as long as it's convenient and fast, we want as much decentralization in our exchanges as possible, including on-chain order books, where we're not depending on a single entity to even manage our order books. Now that's going to be a lot of strong customer preference for the marketplace to give feedback to these hybrid exchanges to try to build out a formal decentralized exchange. Now, of course,
and also, what is the market for that? I mean, the market for that is a small subset of fringe dwellers who don't want to be under this jurisdiction of the SEC. Most people want a frictionless, fast, trading platform.
I was going to say, because this is where we get trapped in the language in crypto, as if decentralization is an end when it's not. It's a means. So we don't want decentralization. We want what decentralization is going to do for us. So consumers, if they say, well, decentralization, what's that? And I say, well, it means you get lower risk, you get greater security, you get faster performance. Like, oh, give me it, right? Don't care what it's called.
Right.
I mean,
or you retaining control.
Generally, it's centralized. That is
I was just giving you an example.
Oh, got it. Yeah, but that's my issue, though. Like, I do wonder how much these decentralized exchanges, the fully decentralized ones, are going to take off once you have order books on the blockchain. That sort of stuff is stuff that builds out the network. It makes it very slow. Like, Ash, do you have a suggestion for like what direction this is going to go in? How we're going to get people interested? Because I want to see more people using DEXs. I want to see the market move that way, but I just don't see the actual consumer base for that.
I think that there's a lot of angles that consumers, I'll just speak on my own behalf here. Convenience, speed, and not necessarily transactional speed of the order entry or the order execution itself, but I don't want to have to wait, even several minutes at this point to access my funds and be able to trade in and out of the coins that I want. I want to log into the exchange from my wallet, or if you're used to BitShares, the exchange was literally in your wallet. So it was really convenient there as well. But also availability of tokens. I think this is another thing. Governments around the world, countless of them, thankfully, they all have to compete with each other. But you may not be able to get a certain token on the one or the two exchanges, that's within your jurisdiction that you're legally allowed to sign up for. We have to assume that centralized exchanges, and I can't ever call these sexes, But these centralized exchanges, at some point,
You just wanted to say that on air.
it's going to consolidate up at the top with the people that abide by, whatever rule set they're given in their jurisdiction. And we're not going to have much opportunity. We're not going to have much access to all the tokens around the world. And this is one of the true powers of a DEX, is that you log in with your blockchain ID. You have access to an array of tokens that may or may not be legal in various different jurisdictions around the world, but depending on how they structure it and how decentralized it is, just decentralization to try to remove the risk, the regulatory risk specifically, but the opportunities there. And now we're starting to see that the transactional throughput of the coins and of the order books on chain are so fast that I don't think I'll ever use a centralized exchange again if I can help it.
Gotcha. Well, Naomi did make that point earlier on. Do you guys remember, cast your mind back, like, I don't know, 6 months or so, it was it Ether Delta or Fork Delta, one of those two, when the founder had to pay a bunch of money to the SEC because while it was technically a decentralized exchange, there was still a point of attack. The regulators attacked and then took the guy's money, and we had to pay income from the decentralized exchange and blah, 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 right? So, okay, I actually reported on this and said what's going to happen is completely anonymous developers are going to launch decentralized exchanges. But the reality is you can only get so far being anonymous. You can't have meetings, you can't collaborate, you can't do this. You can't get anywhere when you're anonymous, which is kind of a sticky spot to be in,
No, I absolutely agree. It's that's why I just wonder about how much this is going to take off. Like I see your point, Ash. Like I hope that this is the future. I want to see more and more people on here, and I think they're going to get better and better. But then there are just so many hurdles that I'm very interested to see how they're going to be overcome.
And even just technical and experience hurdles. I mean, I think for the most part, what's been holding DEXs back at this point is just a bad user experience, be it slow execution or just a confusing interface that people didn't know how to use. We're really starting to get that cleaned up now, and I think it's going to pull a lot more people over.
So what is your favorite?
Bancor's pretty good at that. Have you seen that?
So what's that?
Bancor, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
User interface design is straight up. What you got? What do you want?
Yeah.
Swip.
Yeah, it's
So
like a decentralized shapeshift.
That's what you would recommend, Chris?
For easy user interface, yeah. And now they've got the Bancor X thing, which does Ethereum EOS cross-chain token transfers, which is insane.
What about you, Ash? Any particular DEXs that you recommend people should check out?
I still favor, I don't use it nearly as much anymore, but I love the BitShares exchange, and especially they've got the BitShares community is creating a fork of the EOS IO software to make a bridge in between the BitShares community and the EOS community, which they plan to launch one of their decentralized exchanges on there. I'm super excited. I think in 2 weeks from now or so, EOS Finex from Bitfinex will be coming out. They've been, they were instrumental back in the day. I did a great episode about how they repaid everyone back after their hack a couple years ago.
They issued that like IOU and then they paid them back through fees. That was,
the Bitfinex bond, and you can listen to
that was brilliant.
Eric Voorhees episode 69, Liberty Entrepreneurs, if you want to learn more about that episode. So yeah, no, it's really exciting. I'm super bullish on the whole DEX opportunity, especially this year. I mean, we're starting to get very fast throughput blockchains right now that have either very small or no transaction fees, and I think people are going to find that very nice.
Without naming names.
Look, I'm not here to name drop.
Well, we'll get there in a second. So there's another article getting to some more of that. Before we do, I just want to thank all the people who are watching through Bitbacker. I really appreciate that. I have a couple of power chats that were sent through that I never read on air, so I always read them. Polly asked regarding the Wyoming stuff. Naomi, if you moved to Wyoming, would that make you a crypto cowgirl? What do they call cowgirls down under? It's a really important question, Polly. I'm going to have to think about that. I think they just call them Australians because a lot of Australians have cows. It's a lot of farmland. So simple answer, but I probably would become a cowgirl. And then Master Snack said, loved your piece on the Prince and the microstate in Australia. Sad to see him go. Yeah, Prince Leonard, another thing that happened in the past past, I think it was a week ago now that it happened, but Prince Leonard, who was the Prince of the Australian micronation, passed away. If you don't know anything about the Australian micronation, it was formed in 1970. No one there has paid taxes since that time. They've been taken off the Australian electoral roll and are not eligible for any government benefits that are all the rights of Australian citizens, and yet the government has never legally, like officially recognized them as being their own sovereign entity. They have received a birthday card from the Queen, the Prince had before, but anyway, Prince Leonard passed away in the last week. But very interesting story if you're interested in stories about the little man coming up and fighting oppressive governments who would try to bankrupt them. So I did a piece on that if you wanted to check that out. But thanks to all the people who use Bitback. I really, really appreciate your super chats there. So now, Ash, let's go and talk a little bit about something that I know will interest you. Let me just pull that up.
I'm sending you a power chat right now, by the way.
Yeah, I love power chats. That's so cool. Is that just so you can talk about EOS?
No.
You want to talk about
No, I don't think so.
AI brings artificial intelligence to EOS mainnet. I think this was something you wanted to chat about, Chris.
That was me.
All right, but I know that that Ash is going to want to weigh in.
Sure. So they've been very artful with their Medium posts because they're not like just come out and said, Neo's a pile of garbage, but they're sort of saying that in polite language when they say they chose Neo originally because it was free transactions and it promised high performance. And the reality is that the underlying Neo blockchain isn't moving fast enough with its development, and they want to get on with their business. So that's principally why they're moving to EOS, because it already has the infrastructure and the speed that they need now. So that's basically it. And up until this point, Effect.ai was the most popular, the biggest dApp on Neo. So that's why it's news.
No doubt that.
Interesting. Anything you want to add to that, Ash?
Without shilling EOS here, I think it's really exciting to see businesses which are obviously not scams, with money and with good teams behind them, taking serious looks at the landscape of these smart contract platforms. We had so many of them back in the day, Waves and Stratus and Neo and Ethereum and EOS and all of these, that we're finally starting to find some that business people and entrepreneurs feel has both the technical abilities, maybe the community, but it fits what they feel like will help them become profitable. And this is really exciting for me because up to this point, we really haven't had many profitable businesses built on blockchain, period.
That's a good point.
And now we're starting to see that some entrepreneurs and some teams are looking around and they think that they can become profitable, and they're willing to migrate over, which is going to be no simple task for them, but it's a simpler task for them than staying on Neo and waiting around for that blockchain to evolve in the ways that they hope it would and need it to.
So maybe sometime, Ash, you and I could do an episode, because I haven't been particularly interested in EOS, you could say. To be honest, I need someone to sit me down and walk me through it some more. I've had kind of worries that it's like too centralized and it's got a lot of things going on. So maybe the two of us could sit down and we do a live stream where you walk us through why you love it so much, because you're someone that I respect a lot, and if you're really into this, then I want to learn more about it. And
maybe I could bring you on EOS Radio and we could talk about it.
Oh no, the enemy! All right,
I'll come on that.
All right, Chris, let's do it
straight away.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with like an explainer so that my viewers can figure out what's all this about and should they get involved with that. That would be awesome. I have a power chat that came through from Exciting World Cryptos. He has an awesome YouTube channel. It's a small one that he's trying to build out. So if you haven't checked that out, you guys should head over there. But he sent through a power chat. He says it's a catch-22. Rules are still needed. Crypto world is still the Wild West. The rules will come from unlikable groups. Like it or leave it. Challenges will always be there, as they say. Your whole life is a test. The main answers will never be given to anyone. This is very profound, JR. Very deep, but true, pithy statements there. A lot of rules, they are going to be created by people we don't like, and the best we can do is try to get to politicians first. Like Caitlin said, there are 2 laws that she wants every state to adopt, so I'll be putting those in my video information as well. If we can try nudge this in the right direction and have like community supports, then I think that we can definitely make a difference with all of this.
Hey, Naomi, speaking of the power chat, I know I sent you one, but I paid in Bitcoin. I was curious if it was going to take an hour to come through or if they do zero confirmations. Otherwise, I'll just ask it on air towards the end.
They do zero confirmations, but that has not come through.
Okay.
The Smart Cash one has, but no Bitcoin one has yet.
I'll wait my turn.
All right, I'll keep that over. Yeah, zero confirmation, so it should be instantaneous.
I'm used to EOS. Oh, there's the shill. There it is.
Oh, snap.
He can't help himself, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's move on. A new platform that converts your crypto to fiat without knowing your customer requirements. So everyone is always looking for ways to anonymously get onboarded into crypto, and this is getting harder and harder. But Chris, this is something that you wanted to chat about here, about something that's going on with My Ether wallet. Do you want to take the reins with this?
Sure. I snagged this halfway through the day. So this is My Ether wallet, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, in collaboration with Bitty. So you can basically buy up to, it's like 5,000 Swiss francs, 5,000 US dollars equivalent of Bitcoin or Ethereum without going through KYC right inside the wallet. Now, I honestly don't know how they pulled that off, because it sounds like a maximum of $5,000 of transactional value, like in the life of your account. So it's not like $5,000 a month or whatever, because then you could just gradually launder the money. But if it's 5,000, that's it, then that should be enough, I suppose, for pocket money for people who want to spend crypto on coffee and whatnot. But it's interesting. I didn't think anyone would ever pull anything like that off legally, but they have. So I thought that was good news.
Yeah, it's always very good news, especially, I mean, with companies like Shapeshift that I'm always a huge fan of, just seeing like the more and more regulatory burden that they're under, the more and more scrutiny on that company. Like, it's good to see other options pop up.
Sure, it's good for newbies, because what we don't want is people dealing with a few $100 having to KYC and they just won't bother. They just won't bother. Whereas this gives them at least $5,000 of transactional volume to get their feet wet and get familiar with it and decide if they want to, stay in the crypto world.
I remember when I was in the banking industry, the offshore banking industry specifically, we were able to do no name and kind of no KYC cards for very small amounts as well. So this isn't anything new, but it is really nice to see options coming to crypto like this, because getting into crypto is not as easy from fiat, but getting out of crypto into fiat, I tend to think is a bit more difficult. So yeah, I think we're going to see more options like this as it becomes more and more obvious that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are legitimate. The banks will need to satisfy our demands at some point, and we want to come in and out of crypto and fiat.
Satisfy our demands.
Well, I mean, that's how the market works, but not with too much regulation, though.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about some news from Thailand. So Thai Parliament approves amendments allowing issuance of tokenized securities. I mean, this is definitely the next wave. What we're going to see more and more is just securities overrunning everything. It's going to be bigger than everything we've seen. The number of financial instruments out there at the moment that are going to become digitized, that are going to become, unique digital assets, is going to be overwhelming. So it's interesting to watch different countries kind of take the lead on this, because America certainly is not taking the lead at the moment in terms of their federal policy. So Thailand, they're now allowing the issuance of tokenized securities on the blockchain. Do you guys want to talk about some of this, some of the good things, or perhaps some of the red flags that have come up with this?
Sure. The reason I picked this story out is because it's actually happened. One thing that really has been getting on my nerves lately, maybe I've just woken up to this, is the amount of news that's it's just made of nothing. Like, one thing that really gets on my nerves is some famous hedge fund predicts this price or predicts that price. Like, okay, so all of that is people predicting the future, which we know is impossible. So discard it, right? Doesn't matter. It has actually absolutely no bearing on the future, except, I did say this on the show the other day, the only bearing someone's opinion has on reality is if you accept it and then act on it, then it becomes real. But until then, it's just words, right? You know what I mean? Which is why I know we've got the Elon Musk thing, but I criticized that as well. I was like, so what? Elon Musk, he's not a Bitcoin whale. He's not going to act on his words. it's just a waste of a headline in my view. So that's why I like this story, because it was some actual, it happened, it's in the bag, it's proper law. Thailand, you can now do an STO.
You know, I think it's wonderful too, Chris, that you brought this article up, because I spend time in Thailand, and I just happened to be in the peak of the bubble towards the end of 2017 and into 2018. I was living in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and there are, at least at that time, there were a lot of people interested in cryptocurrencies, and not just to get rich, but trying to build cryptocurrencies. Interested in, like, would Thailand be a good place for cryptocurrencies? It's got, they really appreciate American culture there as well. And so I think it's a great place for digital entrepreneurs specifically to go and maybe experiment with more relaxed laws, more favorable laws for STOs and just crypto and blockchain in general. So this is a very, very big, big news for me personally.
Sweet.
For sure. And speaking of news that nobody wants to hear about because it didn't actually happen. So as you brushed over, Chris, there, Elon Musk called Bitcoin brilliant, better than paper money for value transfer. So again, it's like a lot of these headlines in the news where you have some important person who makes some pronouncement about crypto, whether it's Jamie Dimon who says it's a fraud, and suddenly that affects the market. And then you have Elon Musk, because he's a smart guy. He's built a bunch of companies. He should know things. He says it's great. And, at the end of the day, like, you just have so many smart people actually in the space actually building things that it doesn't really matter what these other people on periphery are saying about it, whether they think it's a fraud, whether they think, whether you're Nouriel Rubini and you think it's this cesspool of whatever. This is a real ecosystem that is creating so many jobs and so much value that it's absolutely incredible what's going on right now, to the point that governments are stepping in and trying to curtail a lot of the stuff that's going on. It's moving too fast. Businesses are just growing so fast. So, I know we don't like to do predictions on this show ever, but it makes me, like, looking at this type of stuff, it makes me excited for the future. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of price movements for any particular coin, but I'm very excited about it.
Is it too early to start talking about moons again? I think it's too early.
It is.
I saw some article today that was talking about all the money that the institutions have put in so far, and it was quite bullish, saying, this is the next wave. But the thing is, do they have to touch Bitcoin, to get into this stuff, or can they just go straight into whatever alternative coin?
Very good question. Now, I've been thinking about this, and this is so I'm thinking about institutions, and I'm thinking about the problem they have getting in is, if they've got big pots of money that their clients want them to invest, right? They're limited by how much institutional money they can actually put in, because the market is so small. Their trade sizes are going to be absolutely tiny, because if they're not small, they're going to absolutely slap the market with big trades, and they're going to move the market, which is no good to them, because they're not going to be able to get enough money in to make any decent returns, because the very fact of them pouring money in is going to push the market up and make it more expensive for the next batch of investment that they want to make. So this is a problem. This is a bit of a catch-22 for the crypto market right now, is with, institutional money. But the institutions are going to be like, well, we need the market to grow before we can even get in. It's kind of a very difficult situation we're in right now, for the reason I said, trade sizes.
Yeah, the liquidity. Like,
exactly.
While I don't think that they're going to need to go into Bitcoin before going into other tokens over the long term, because the fiat access will open up and it'll flow more freely, that they won't be bottlenecked to Bitcoin to entering the crypto markets over time. But for now, they have such liquidity risk and liquidity needs that Bitcoin's really the only one that's going to satisfy them, even in the short term.
Right. Maybe Bitcoin and Ethereum. What's today? Bitcoin's traded 7.6 billion, Ethereum 3.6 billion, which is big for the crypto space, given that XRP is third and it's 569 million. So, but still, they're pretty small numbers when you consider the forex market. It's like 6 trillion a day.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, these are still very small markets. I mean, everybody's so concerned. I won't say everybody, that's ridiculous, but people are so concerned about large institutional money getting into this space. And it almost feels like they are wanting this so that we enter a bull market again. But these institutional people, that I can almost assure you that there's no big rush to get into this. The volume's not there. The price swings are way outside of their normal risk tolerance. And so, this kind of leads into the whole ETF topic that we were going to chat about, Naomi.
Yeah,
Sure.
so if we wanted to go straight into there, so the SEC, they're apparently now reviewing 2 more Bitcoin ETF proposals. It's like the regular thing we do on the show, isn't it? Where we say, what new Bitcoin ETFs have been put off this week or added this week, and it's just this ongoing thing where nothing's being approved. They're not moving their feet. There's constantly a word like, I believe that Hester Pierce last week was saying, oh, we are going to make a decision soon. And someone else in the SEC was like, yes, definitely some clarity coming one day. And it's like this constant thing where we get no clarity. We don't know what's going on. Things get pushed back and back. So now we have 2 more to add to the list. So we have the Van X Solid X proposal, which was filed with CBOE exchange, now appeared in Wednesday's edition. We could look into specifically what these are, whether they're actual asset backed, what's going on with them. But I mean, I presume that this is all just going to keep getting pushed back, and it's not really going to be that newsworthy.
Yeah, it's just the same old, right? It's like and there's plenty of conspiracy theories about this being like, oh, they're pushing down these investment vehicles to try to suppress the price so they can accumulate. How long have we heard this stuff? But I just don't think they're in any big rush to get into this. It doesn't fit what they're looking for investment wise. It's way too risky for the most part. There's not, maybe now there's good ways to hedge some of that risk, but and the government's going to see this as this is the riskiest asset class in the government's eyes. And so for them, they can play the card of protecting the consumer if they continue to delay this. And what's better than taking care of the kids? Well, it's protecting the consumers.
Well, that's the things that Hester Pierce said before, where she said, like, it's not the SEC's jurisdiction to be making pronouncements about an entire asset class. That's not our job. It's not to say whether this is dangerous in general. So it's about making sure that companies provide clarity about that danger. It's making sure that they follow the guidelines. So I think that they're just severely overstepping right now, where they're just denying all these requests because they think that this is a volatile asset class. That's not their jurisdiction. It's not up to them to make pronouncements about that. There is far more dangerous, sketchy things out there that I'm a lot less bullish about. That I think are kind of scammy things, like Bitcoin, to be protecting us from that because you deem an entire asset class to be dangerous. Like, I think Hester Pierce it seems she's been a big friend of crypto so far on the far side from Jay Clayton. She seems to be the voice of reason in the SEC, saying like, let's actually work within our jurisdiction. Meanwhile, Jay Clayton is the one saying, presume everything's a security. We want control of it all. Yeah.
When you said that earlier on, Naomi, I thought it's analogous to saying, day to day, assume everything you do is illegal.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And then act accordingly. You'd be like, well, I'll just stand here and freeze and do nothing then, right?
Right.
Well, that's probably illegal as well.
It's absolutely, it's so terrifying when you think of a world where you need to presume that everything you do is illegal unless you're given clarity otherwise. Because, what's a person to do in that situation? You can't live because I'm sure the government hasn't laid out every single thing. Like, read, is that legal or not? Well, presume it's illegal because we haven't heard from government. Like, that's not a way to live. Everything needs to be presumed legal until you're given express orders that it's not. And even then, the government needs to back up why that's their business, why it's in their jurisdiction to making laws about that, because they make a whole lot of laws that should not be it should not apply to us, but somehow do. Well, I just got a power chat through from Anonymous, who asks, is there a single performer better than T Swift? I think that is a stupid question. Obviously, there is not. And Taylor Swift is the greatest. So,
it only cost me $5. So now I know the truth.
Well, now you do know the truth. And thank you for that power chat on the show. You could have asked me that in person because you're on the show, but I really appreciate you using the power chat because the power chat is awesome and I love Bitbacker, and I'm just going to send my address to all of you if you want to ask a question. But if you are not on Bitbacker, go, and you don't need an account to use it. You can have a look at other people's accounts. There are some great content creators there, great people doing awesome things. So go at least have a browse there and see what's on there, because it's a pretty exciting landscape. We are running out of time real quickly here. So on the last couple of things, I just want to run through some headlines. So the Galaxy S10 apparently has been including, there's rumors it will include a crypto wallet. This were rumors that were held over from last year, but now they are saying that it has a storage function that's designed for cryptocurrency private keys. That's kind of interesting that that's built into the phone. And then the other thing I just want to mention in passing is this Brock Pierce-Mark karpelles war that's going on over Mt. Gox's future. We talked a little bit on the show last week, and I want to go into it when we have more information. At the moment, it's just kind of a war of words and a lot of speculation. But anyone have any passing thoughts on what's going on there?
Just about the Brock Pierce stuff, I think it's great that how he's trying to make Mt. Gox seem the opposite of Bear Stearns. So whereas, Bear Stearns, people took it on the chin and lost a bunch of money. Mt. Gox, just like Bitfinex, he wants to resurrect Mt. Gox and try to make all of the depositors whole again. And this is something that doesn't happen in the current legacy system. And it can really show not only the morality that the cryptocurrency space has at its root, but just how we have options whenever we're not so heavily regulated, and we have options to make our people whole again. And I know Brock for various reasons has a good and a bad rap about just his personality in general. I listened to a really great podcast the other day with Crypto Shill Nye, and he interviewed Brock Pierce, and it was a very vulnerable and open and passionate and emotional podcast that Brock gave. I highly recommend everyone go and check that out. I'm not affiliated at all, but I was touched, and I learned a lot from that podcast.
Can you go into detail? Like, I don't know if Brock's talked about how he plans to do this. Is he out of his own pocket wanting to make people whole, or is he going to resurrect it and through making it profitable, using some of those fees, transaction fees, funnel that back into users?
It's like a Binance token, the way I understood it.
Yeah, I mean, and it worked really well for you're saying Binance. I thought you said Bitfinex, but yeah, I'm not sure. He didn't get into that in the interview, but there's so many very creative things that we can do with crypto tokens now. Again, the Bitfinex bond back in the day is a good example of how you can pay people back.
That's the most obvious model, actually. That's starting to make sense to me. I like what you said there, Ash, about Brock Pierce not wanting the Mt. Gox brand to go down in history as, the Mt. Gox scandal, and flipping that to actually the Mt. Gox goes down in history as having sentimental value because it all worked out in the end, right? And may even be successful. If they issued a Gox coin to all of the people who are owed, and then if Mt. Gox is a successful exchange, generates fees, it can start making people whole gradually.
Yeah,
no doubt. Following the interviews, What Bitcoin Did podcast, he interviewed Jed McCaleb, and I think he was interviewing karpelles later. I heard the Jed McCaleb one, and it was interesting because I didn't realize that it had already been hacked, and there was already funds missing out of a wallet before Jed sold it to karpelles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. In the Mt. Gox, I remember I did an interview with JJ Hales, the creator of Bitbacker, actually, at the time that all the Mt. Gox stuff was going on, when it started to shut down and no one knew what was happening. And there was what just stands out to me and from memory is just how Mark responded to that. And he's just responding in this nonchalant way, talking about his cat on his keyboard, and this people whole life disappeared, right? So I'm completely with you, Ash, that and Chris, I would love for this to go down in history as not this giant joke, this thing where someone just either through neglect or through I don't know, by dodgy actions, lost a lot of money. I would love to see Brock's vision come to light.
Sure.
Yeah, and if it's our anti-Bear Stearns, how cool would that be? Because right now Gox is like our Bear Stearns, but what if it's Bear Stearns. Well, boom, there you go. What type of story is that?
Well,
Another movie.
Well, there are a lot of there are a lot of parallels there, right? Because you had people at the time saying, "Oh, well, there should be a bailout for Mt. Gox," all this stuff, and it's like, really? Did we really create Bitcoin? Was this really this ecosystem that we built out so that we could become another financial bailout system where people have moral hazards and they dig themselves into a hole, and the community comes in and bails them out? Like, I mean, so on that side of things, like, no, I don't want to see bailouts. I want to see companies going down because they were
made dumb decisions.
Yeah, they made dumb decisions and then they died, right?
Right.
If we could also take, I mean, Mt. Gox is this infamous case that has been held out in the Bit license hearings as this, oh, well, Mt. Gox is a thing, therefore Bit license. Yeah,
this is what happens when we're not in there.
Exactly. And so on the other side, it is also useful to take ammo away from regulators and say, you know, this is something that was early stages. There was a hack that we came in. So, like, there are definitely two sides there, you know. One thing we definitely don't want to see is a forced bailout. Like, if this is just a voluntary thing where the community comes together, that's awesome. I would have liked to see a voluntary thing where perhaps people came together and said, oh, out of the goodness of my heart, I want to give all of my money to Chase for the great job that they did. You know,
thank you, Wells Fargo, for being so awesome.
I would like to see taxpayer money not forcibly be taken from me in the form of TARP bailouts that completely, you know, inflated away people's savings. I mean, it's a very different scenario when you're talking about bailouts in terms of a community deciding, and, you know, a person like Brock coming in and saying, I'm going to implement this process that would help credit these people. So I would like to see something like that.
Sure.
And, like, you know, the capitalist system, some people have been saying maybe Brock stands to gain, like, if he can pull this off, he'll also, you know, make away with a lot of, not make away with, but like generate himself quite a bit of revenue if he can create this Mt. Gox coin that becomes useful. I don't know. I was just reading that on Reddit. I don't know how that would fit into things. But
yeah.
But
and I hope he does. I hope he does. I hope he creates so much value.
Time he should get money.
Yeah, no doubt. I hope he can.
Absolutely.
And make all the old, you know, depositors whole. I mean, how great would that be? Brock comes in, resurrects Mt. Gox, turns it back into a profitable business. All of the old creditors, I mean, all the old depositors get made whole, and Brock's got this awesome business that's making money now and helping sustain our communities and our economy. Man, that's a great ending.
Absolutely. And on that note, let's wrap it up there. It covered a lot of stuff today. I really appreciate your time. We started running over more and more in these things because the guests are always so good that I just want to hear from you guys. So I appreciate your time, all of you. Ash, Chris, Sasha, thank you so much for being on here and sharing your wisdom and your time with all of us. It's very much appreciated. Huge thank you to the people who sent through power chats on Bitbacker. So JR, Anonymous, who definitely wasn't Ash asking about Taylor Swift. That was weird. Mac and Polly, I really appreciate you guys using that. If you haven't checked out Bitbacker, go have a look there. Some great people on there, and it's a fun platform you can play around with. And to everyone who's just been in the chat chatting, I love all of you guys so much. I really appreciate you being here on this Friday afternoon if you are on my time zone, or perhaps it's Saturday where you are, but I appreciate your time and you sharing this hour with us. So go and enjoy your weekend. Have a wonderful time, and I will see you either in the Telegram group or on Bitbacker or on any of the other platforms that I'm hopelessly addicted to.
Or possibly on the karaoke floor.
Or on the karaoke floor. No, because then I feel like I'm bad energy now, and someone else will get off the shirt. Ash.
Well, it's been great coming on for my first time, Naomi. It's been awesome. Chris and Sasha, is really great to chat with you both today.
Likewise,
too. So it's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you guys too. Thank you.
I'm going to put everyone's details in the description. So if you want to follow them on social media, if you want to follow the platforms where they're doing podcasts and YouTube shows and all kinds of awesome things, you'll have all of that info because they're great and you should be following all of them. So thank you guys so much. And I'll see you guys next time.
See ya.